iPad Air is basically the bigger brother of the iPad mini. And the great thing about the iPad Air is that it works with the smart keyboard. It's actually a 10.5-inch device. So it has a screen that's about 0.3 inches larger than the entry-level $329 iPad. So you're going to get a larger screen, a much higher quality screen here on the iPad Air, and of course you get that A12 Bionic processor underneath the hood. Now compared to the entry-level iPad 7, the iPad Air 3 is noticeably thinner, living up to its name at only 0.24 inches thick. But what's surprising is that the iPad Pro is actually 0.1 inches thinner than the iPad Air, so something to keep in mind there. So the iPad Mini 5 and the iPad Air 3 share a lot of DNA. The only difference between these two devices besides size is the fact that it includes a smart connector on the iPad Air 3 to allow you to attach something like this, the Apple Smart Keyboard. And the great thing about having the smart keyboard is that it basically transforms your tablet into something you can write like a laptop with. But with the new mouse and trackpad support in iPadOS 13.4 and higher, you can pair a mouse or a trackpad and control your iPad Air 3 that way, and Logitech also makes a combo touch for the iPad Air 3. But compared to the iPad 7, one of the biggest differences is screen quality. Just like the iPad mini, this thing has a glorious screen, not quite as high of a pixel per inch rating here on the iPad Air 3 compared to the mini, but the screen is glorious. It is a P3 wide color display. It supports True Tone. It features a laminated digitizer, so it feels like you're touching the content on screen. Of course, there's an anti-reflective coating as well. If I had to describe the iPad Air 3, I'd describe it as a slightly larger, much more polished version of the entry-level iPad. So here's that entry-level iPad from the previous generation, the iPad 6. We're going to compare that to the iPad Air 3. Mainly just want to pay attention to the thickness differences here, since the iPad 7 is almost the same size screen-wise and basically the same footprint from a length and width perspective. And that's why the smart keyboard will work with the iPad Air 3 along with the iPad 7, the same exact smart keyboard, because the bezels on the iPad Air 3 are actually just smaller to fit that larger display in the same footprint. And you can see some of those bezel differences here when comparing the iPad 6 with the iPad Air 3. And on the entry-level iPad, you have that undesirable air gap that promotes reflectivity, among other things. And here's the iPad Air 3, no air gap, so it feels like you're actually touching the app icons on screen. And then notice the reflectivity here. There's the iPad entry-level model. I'm going to move it over to the iPad Air 3. Almost no reflectivity there with those AirPods. And the iPad Air 3 supports P3 wide color. So I'll just tap that. You notice the little image there on the right for the iPad Air 3. You can actually see that thanks to the wider range of color available on that display. And remember, the iPad Air 3 features the same A12 Bionic chip that you'll find in the mini, so you're going to have a lot of power under the hood to handle whatever you throw at it.